Hi everyone, my name's Jesandy. I'm a competitive Tekken player from North America and have been competing in Tekken for the last 5 years. Today, DashFight's given me the opportunity to provide you guys with a guide starring the best character in the game, at least in my opinion, King. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to DashFight for more character guides and check out their website for all things FGC. Let's lock in, y'all. King in Tekken is a grappler, which means he likes doing big grabs for big damage. He also has some of the fastest and strongest Whiff Punishers in the game. His neutral tools are also really solid, leaving King in situations that lead to knockdowns, or putting him up close to his opponent. To make up for this, his lows are pretty slow and they do not do the most damage. The only exception in this case is forward neutral 2, which does about 55 damage on counter hit and is minus 13 on block. In general, he struggles against strong defense, but he can open up his opponent with calculated mix-up attempts in order to keep the opponent in a continuous guessing game between a throw or a low damaging mid that keeps him close to his opponent. In this game, at least in my opinion, he could be played pretty flexibly, either defensively or aggressively. This is due to the fact that back 3 in this game is considered armored, and he didn't have this before in any of the previous Tekken titles, so you can use this more defensively. And aggressively, he has Jaguar Sprint. Jaguar Sprint in this game is pretty funny because it leaves some very silly situations, and all of these options are safe on block. These all usually lead to a knockdown or some pretty good damage, which means that you can keep up the aggression. Overall, his aggressive playstyle is very overt in the way that you can kind of force these situations onto your opponent very quickly, or you can play back and wait for a counter hit throw and make your opponent basically run into some situation that leaves you in a counter hit, leaves your opponent in a counter hit position where you can do something like back 1-2 on counter hit, which gives you a full-blown combo. You can do down forward 2-1, which also leaves you in a really bad position as the opponent anyways for some really good damage. This is off of a 13 frame move, so for what it is, playing defensively might just pay off. King's strong pokes consist of a few moves, and ones that you want to be using in the neutral. To start off, he has 2-1, which is a strong 10 frame Punisher. This is pretty good because it leaves him with 25 damage and at plus 8. This is only minus 3 on block, so it's very similar to his 1-2. It's just the more damaging version of his 1-2. To kind of go off with the list of his Punishers, he also has back 1-2, which is his 12 frame Punisher. This is honestly a really strong 12 frame. It leaves him at plus 5 and does 33 damage. On counter hit, this is also a launcher. Counter hit launcher. It is a really strong tool for both block punishment and any opponents who try to overextend their offense. This is a really good tool to stop that, to put an end to any mashing. At 14 frames, he has back 2-1. This is a really strong Punisher from King, as it does lead to 37 damage, and it's a knockdown. At the wall, this does wall splash. So, just to kind of show you, if we do set her up at the wall, this does give him a full-blown mini combo. It might as well be a regular combo. 14 frame Punisher. Pretty strong. Instead of just doing... Actually, this does more damage. You might want to do that. On normal hit, this is, as I mentioned, 37 damage. It doesn't do anything on counter hit, but it's important to know that if you delay this, your opponent can duck it, even on normal hit. If you're going to use it to punish, you have to use it as soon as you can, basically, as quickly as you can. If you delay it by a smidgen, they can duck it. So just be aware of that. He also has a really strong poking tool, which is also 14 frames, which can also be used as a 14 frame Punisher. His down forward 1. This is a really good move to kind of start netting up a lot of damage from your opponent. This only leaves King at plus 3, but it does give him 15 damage. On block, this is -1, which means King can maneuver and still play the game pretty well at a good standing. And to follow up, if you think your opponent's going to mash, you can follow up with down forward 1-2, which gives an extra 15 damage. It also leaves King at +5, which is really good. Really good plus frames. Do be careful, however, as if you do get the second hit blocked, this is jab punishable. So you want to really be careful with just throwing this out because your opponent can punish this with the jab. Some other good moves from King are his 13 frame mid. His down forward 2 does only 12 damage on hit. Doesn't do a whole lot, but it's to get your opponent to stop moving. It is only +4, which is a good amount of plus frames, but it's not the best in the world. At +4, it's mostly just to get your opponent to stop moving. On counter hit, however, this does lead to a completely damaging counter hit combo. It's a really strong counter hit tool. You can use it as a counter hit fishing tool where you're just looking for counter hits, or you could use it as a tool to get your opponent to start respecting your spacing. The move does have some range issues, but its tracking makes up for that. And on block it is -6, so compared to down forward 1 where it's -1, this is more of a move where you might want to resort to using it for counter hitting only, or just doing single damage, single poke options. You don't want to continue your offense after this just because you're at a high risk of getting counter hit. So just be aware of that. And then if you think your opponent's going to swing on the second hit, you can finish it off with down forward 2-1. This is a high and it is duckable. This is mostly for opponents who like to retaliate after doing down forward 2 on block, but it is at a risk because if your opponent gets hit by the first hit, they can duck the second hit. Only on counter hit, where it's guaranteed, where they can't duck, they'll just get hit and they'll get comboed. Normal hit, similar to something like back 2-1, they can duck the second hit even if they get hit. So something to be aware of. He also has shove, forward, neutral 1+2. This move is a really good move. This gets your opponent to respect your spacing a little bit more. As you can see, this isn't doing a whole lot of damage because it's not doing any damage at all. This move does not do any damage on hit, and you might be wondering, well, why would I want to use a move like that? Because on counter hit, this gives forward 2-1 for free. That's right. Forward 2-1 is guaranteed. You know what else is guaranteed? I just missed it, but back 3, completely guaranteed on counter hit. This is coming from a 10 frame move, essentially. The fastest you can do shove is 10 frames. I know it says 9 in the bottom right hand corner, but this is a forward neutral move, so the fastest it can be done is 10 frames. Most people take more than 10 frames to do this, but for the damage that you get from a 10 frame move, and the follow-up that you get from this, it's very strong. On block, this does leave you and your opponent at 0 frames, which basically means nobody has an advantage or a disadvantage, which basically means both of you can do whatever you want. To just kind of nerd out a little bit, you could do shove into shove, and it will trade with the jab. This is something that I'm known for doing. I've personally never seen any other King players do this, but doing shove into shove can trade with the jab, even on block, and you can get that for free basically. Similarly, you can also do forward 2-1 afterwards, and this is completely guaranteed, and this is just off a jab trade. So it's really strong if you can master the speed of it. But even by itself, it's a really good counter hit tool, and that's all you want to use this for, is just counter hit purposes. Another really good tool of his, back 3. This move is -10 on block, which means this jab that Xiao Yu is doing is considered a punish. This is, however, an armored move. So if your opponent is pushing into back 3, if they're pushing a lot of buttons into back 3, this will absorb any of those buttons, and back 3 will essentially win out every single time. It does a lot of damage on hit. This does a whopping 43 damage, and it leaves your opponent in really bad positioning, guaranteeing alley kick here. If you want to do the follow-up, this isn't back 3 by itself. Back 3 by itself just does this. Your opponent can back roll out of this. If you want to do the follow-up, just hold 1+2. That's all you have to do. Just hold 1+2 as soon as you push back 3, and you're guaranteed extra 20 damage. It's a whole lot of damage for what it's worth. He also has forward, neutral 2, which is easily one of the best lows he's ever received in a Tekken game, period. This move is +7, and on block, this move is only -13. Now, a lot of characters cannot get a whole lot of damage from a -13 low. For King specifically, he can only do something like wall setting 4. And this only does 20 damage for a move that on counter hit does 55 damage. It is a lot of damage on the table for King. And on hit, it's 17 damage. Like, this is one of the most damaging lows that he has. And also, the risk return is just so skewed for King because he gets a lot of damage, a lot of plus frames. It's +7 on hit. It's a really good move. Like, abuse this move as much as you can. That being said, it is 18 frames, and it is a forward neutral move, which, as I mentioned before, is about 19 frames at frame perfect speed. So you want to use this at a further range where it can reach and your opponent is least expecting this to hit. Using it up close has a chance to get interrupted, so you might want to use this at a bit more safer range. To pair this, he has forward 1. Forward 1 is 20 frames, which is more or less about the same speed as forward neutral 2, and it covers about the same amount of distance. Forward 1 is a homing move, so if your opponent tries to step, this is going to connect. It leaves your opponent at -14 in a ballerina spin, and basically forces your opponent to hold back afterwards. On counter hit, you are guaranteed people's elbow, or up forward 2. Whole lot of damage for a 20 frame safe on block, by the way. Safe on block mid. This is only -5, which means King can't really retaliate, but he could definitely still move around. Super strong move. Definitely want to use that in the rotation. To kind of wrap this up, he also does have forward 3. This move does lack in range a little bit, but for what it does, it's pretty good. This is a 15 frame move, and on hit, paired with 1+, this has to be timed, by the way. If you do forward 3 into a well-timed 1+2, he gets to follow it up DDT. This gets him 38 damage total, plus some pretty good Oki. And if you time it well enough, you can get some really funky situations depending how your opponent wakes up. So, really good Oki situation, really good positioning for King. This move is -8 on block, so you kind of, again, want to use this for moves. You want to use this against a person who is ducking for throws a lot, but you don't want to use it. You would rather use this instead of a hop kick, if that makes sense. So when you're using, if you want to call out your opponent who is ducking a lot, instead of doing up forward 4, which is -13 frames, you want to use forward 3, which is safer, and still gives you a good amount of damage plus positioning. It's kind of just giving up that big damage for something that's a little bit more safe, keeps you in the game a bit longer. Which leads me to kind of his next Punisher. It's up forward 4. This is his 15 frame launcher tool. You would only ever want to use this for launching, as this move does lack range. Using this for a Whiff Punisher is pretty not the best thing. The range on this is not considerable. This is -13 on block, but on hit, this gives him a full Whiff launcher. So, just one of his launchers. Lastly, King does have wall running 3. This move is pretty nice to use occasionally. Again, at a certain range, doing this up close is not the best thing to do. It is 20 frames, but it does need to be in a wall running state, so that's about 23 to 25 frames. It's a really slow move. and it is kind of linear, but at range it becomes a little bit easier, or harder, excuse me, to step. And on hits, you are guaranteed forward 2+3 afterwards. So you get 46 damage total. Afterwards, you can also get up forward 3+4, which is his new armor move. And depending on how your opponent wakes up, you can get some extra damage in. Sometimes that move whiffs, so if you're not too keen on using that, you could just use forward 2+3 as a follow-up. You could also do forward 4+4 for 1 less damage, but it does do a bit of a silly animation of them flying back. Personally, I use this a little bit more, forward 2+3, just because there's less room for error and it's a little easier to do. Again, the other two, there's a chance that you might miss time the forward 4+4, and you just miss out on a lot of damage. Those are his good buttons anyways, and we'll go ahead and talk about his Whiff Punishers now. So King has a pretty decent variety of Whiff Punishers. When I say variety, I mean like the usage of them. You can use the usage of his Whiff Punishers in a variety of ways. So obviously, the number one reason you'd want to use a Whiff Punisher is to punish some move that just completely whiffs or it misses hitting you entirely. King has 4-2-1, which is a heat engager. On hit, this does 37 damage, and it puts him in heat, as mentioned before. This move is really strong because of the speed it has. This is a 15 frame move, and it's got some pretty good distance. As you can see here, I'm at range, close to range 3, and it's hitting from this far. You can imagine if Xiao Yu is doing a move here, and she's pushing into King, it just makes it a lot more easier to whip punish. 4-2-1 is also a combo starter in heat. So if you are in heat mode and Xiao Yu whiffs a move, this becomes a combo starter. This is easily one of the most utilizable Whiff Punisher tools I think there is in the game. It's got good speed, it's got good range. The damage is really good. It's a really good Whiff Punisher. Another one of his Whiff Punishers, as I mentioned before, is back 3. This move is mostly for the damage and positioning. You wouldn't really want to use this move too much. Like this move is mostly you want to cash out for the damage. This does 43 damage compared to back 4-2-1's 37. And again, the positioning afterwards can get you alley kick guaranteed, which is an extra 14 damage. Back 3 is probably his longest reaching Whiff Punisher because this does hit at range 3 consistently. Like this is just a straight up range 3 will always hit. I don't know why it hits that far. This move is -10 as I mentioned before, but at range it is impossible to punish with a jab for some characters. That being said, this move is kind of like a do-it-all kind of move. This move can be used as a Whiff Punisher, it can be used as to interrupt certain strings from a certain range, and it'll work out regardless because it is armored. So this does have a lot of variety in how you could use this defensively. He also has back 2-1, which is a little bit quicker, for the expense of range. This does not hit nearly as far compared to the other ones, and you do have to be up close, but this is also a pretty good Whiff Punisher. Does the same amount of damage as forward 2-1, and it leads to a knockdown on hit. You can also do back 1-2 for a Whiff Punisher, but this doesn't do nearly as much damage compared to all the other ones, though it does make up for it in some decent range, and some pretty good, again, pretty good damage, pretty good plus frames, just not a whole lot of pros that you get from it, if that makes sense, compared to the other moves. Lastly, he does have full crouch down forward 2. This move is used most often against characters who tend to whiff a little bit more consistently with certain moves. For example, if you're playing as Xiao Yu, and let's just say we do something like, we'll do jab into back 1+2. And we'll go ahead and have King here. Go ahead and just have him back up a little bit. If he sees something like that, just whiff outright, you can just hang back here and look for that whiff punish, and it'll consistently hit pretty far. The reason you would want to use this compared to the other ones is that this is a combo starter. Completely good, completely strong, pretty good range, pretty good speed. The only downside is that this is on block minus 14. And most characters have some form of a 14 frame punish, and some of them do have 14 frame heat engagers, so try not to use this out in the open. As a Whiff Punisher, absolutely go ahead and use this. This is definitely one of those moves where if you think your opponent's going to whiff from a certain range, it doesn't hurt to stay out here and just go into full crouch, see if something whiffs, and try to Whiff Punish with this. Moving on to King's heat moves, as I mentioned before, 4-2-1 is probably his go-to heat engager. This is really strong because it forces your opponent to take a throw mix. If they duck here, you could just do wall run 3, you get some guaranteed damage in. You could do forward 3, get some free damage in. If they decide to hold back and block, you can try and mix them up with a throw. There's a lot you can do with the plus frames off of 4-2-1 being a heat engager that King can really enforce and get your opponent to start panicking really quickly. And this also can just be used to really start your offense against opponents who struggle to space themselves correctly. If you're using it in basically a whiff punish situation. So if your opponent is constantly throwing moves out, whiffing all these kinds of moves, again, if Xiao Yu is doing something like this, you can immediately start your offense in a really good standing and really enforce that heat pressure. And it really, again, forces your opponent to start rethinking their options. It's just really good. It's just a really good move. He also does have 4-2+3. I personally don't like using 4-2+3 just because it's a little too linear and slow for my liking, so it is safe at -9 on block, but this move isn't really a move you want to be using too much. It is -9, which means you give up your turn effectively, and while it does have good range, again, it's pretty linear. You can use it by all means, just be aware of those things. It's a little linear, the range is kind of okay, and it leaves you at -9, so definitely use with caution. King also has a lot of utility heat moves, and when I mean utility, it means that these moves are usually paired with other moves, so or specific like preceding situations. So I can't just use this specific heat move compared to like 4-2-1 or 4-2+3. I have to use some other move in order to use it at its best when it's used in conjunction with another move. For example, down back 1+2. This move does 0 damage. This doesn't do anything to your opponent because this is an armor absorption move. All this move does is it absorbs damage from your opponent, and if something gets hit, you can punish with the follow-up by hitting 2, and this puts King into heat. Really good situation, really scary, because you can immediately activate Jaguar Sprint and put your opponent in a scary mix-up. Not the best combo in the world, but you can get you can see where I'm going with this. This move is really a incredibly strong move against, I mean, you can see the armor absorption lasts for quite a bit. As a heat engager, this works amazingly, but it is utility. This is specifically for defensive players who like to, who could use this to call out some really long range moves, some long animation moves that have pretty long recovery. You could also use this offensively and kind of tempt your opponent to swing on your own minus frames and basically frame trap your opponent with an absorption and then follow up with a 2. Regarding this, it's best to use it defensively, in my opinion. He also has Freedom Facebuster, which is his pedigree, which does 50 damage, leaves your opponent on the floor. This is another heat engager from him. This move can only be done to opponents who are in crouch, and this doesn't work on standing opponents. There are 2 moves total that put his opponents in crouch. Forward, forward 2, which guarantees the crouch throw, and Jaguar Step 2. These are the 2 moves you would want to use this to get into heat, and personally, I like using Jaguar Step 2 just because he can have a throw mix-up out of it. Forward, forward 2 is just a little too long and a little too linear of a move to try and use out in the open. So maybe if you use it out at a certain distance, that'd be a little bit better, but something like forward 2 plus 3, Jaguar Step 2, it's a little bit more ambiguous with what I could do. So definitely a utility type heat engager. Lastly, he does have RKO, which is locked behind his Jaguar Sprint. This is honestly a bit more of like a knowledge check against your opponent. Using this out in the open is a little scary just because there's a lot of time between you and your opponent to do this move. I would personally use this after something like forward, forward 1 hit into this, where your opponent is kind of forced to take a mix-up. This could be used after a combo ender as well, where your opponent, again, can sometimes be forced to take this mix-up. On normal hit, this does 45 damage by itself, which is pretty good, and it leaves your opponent in a grounded state, and they're kind of forced to take a mix-up sometimes, depending on how good you are with, you know, incoming mix-ups. So it's scary, but it's not really like it's not something you want to be using in the neutral too often, just because 1, this is a high, and 2, it is reactable. You do want to use this sparingly for when it matters the most, and mix it up with, you know, Jaguar run stances where you can. So to talk about King's offensive and defensive like pressure, game plan, and all the things that fall in between, King players are known for being overtly aggressive. And when I mean overtly aggressive, I mean they just like grabbing. Like, there's not a King player in the world who does not like to grab. This is just in the King player's nature, it's in our DNA. This is something that a lot of King players love doing, and it's something that can often be used as a crutch. But when the grab does happen, and when it does successfully land, it nets him a lot of damage. So offensively, King players will want to start mixing up your opponent, but you want to be mindful of how you're going about mixing up your opponent, just because your opponent is also aware of this kind of stuff. So doing stuff like crouch dash into a throw, or crouch dash into another ambiguous throw, you want to be mindful that your opponent is going to be aware of that, and it's very likely that they'll duck. So doing stuff like mix-ups will want to make the King player rethink their strategy in order for them to make the throw game more effective. So instead of constantly going for these throw mix-ups, it's better to sprinkle in some of these smaller tools in between to make his throw mix-ups look a little bit more ambiguous, and it forces your opponent to really start to rethink, like, what's a little bit more scarier, the pokes or his throws that seem to be occasionally chipping me out. It's all about finding that balance in between going for a throw versus going for mid and mixing up your opponent. The offense can definitely be scary with something like Jaguar Sprint. Personally, I see this move as a gimmick more so than anything, but on wake-up situations, this is definitely a move that can turn the tide very quickly, just because his options do a lot of damage, and all of these options are relatively safe, with the exception of the before, which puts him grounded. And his 2 highs that can be ducked. These 2, with the exception of those 3, which even on block could be safe depending on the matchup. That's just something that if you want to continue the aggression, you absolutely can. And then, of course, if he's in heat, you have to worry about his heat smash. That does 64 damage, and on block, his heat smash forces him into a Jaguar Sprint mix. With King, you really want to think, there's a lot to think about, and at the same time, you have to just kind of know when to pick and choose your shots for both King and the person defending against King. So playing against King, you want to really just think, is he going to go for a grab? Cool, duck, but that's to the King player's advantage because now you've implemented the mix-up. It's kind of like playing chess against your opponent at this point. It's like, am I going to go for a mix-up? Will I ever go for a mix-up? Am I always going to go for a grab? And that really is the game plan for King, is just getting your opponent to hesitate, and the second that they are hesitating, you can do smaller pokes that start adding up, and then when your opponent starts worrying about the pokes, you're like, oh god, I need to start holding back a bit more, and then the second you start holding back a bit more, you get thrown. So it's like this never-ending chasm of just like layers and layers and layers. With King, defending against certain opponents, he does have really good counter hit tools. As I mentioned before, he has back 1-2, which on hit is counter hit launcher, but it's -9. And similar with his down forward 2, it is a counter hit launching tool. But at the same time, on block, it's -6. So, I'm sorry, did I say -9? I meant -8 for back 1. Back 1 is -8. Down forward 2, -6. Both of these moves leave you in really disadvantaged situations, so you really want to know when to pick and choose, like, is it appropriate to use down forward 2 now and give up my turn entirely? Is it appropriate to use back 1 now and give up my turn entirely? You want to really take calculated risks when playing with King, and making sure that when you are doing these things, you want to look at your health bar and be like, okay, well, if I'm doing this and I have a lot of health, I have nothing really to worry about, so maybe I can do down forward 1 instead, or maybe I can do shove instead. Both safer moves, they still get you some pretty good damage in between if it lands on counter hit or on hit, and it keeps you in the game a little bit longer. He also has, again, back 3, really good. Honestly, this is probably one of his best keep out tools. If an opponent tries to enter with a string or with a long range move, this will definitely stuff it out. We'll have her do forward 3. Right? Most Xiaoyus love doing this to enter the space. So, even on block, this is something that you can do to really force a keep out situation against your opponent. Just because the damage absorption is really strong, you can really test the waters with this with a -9 move, -6 move, -8 move occasionally, but you get the idea. There's a lot to do with back 3 just being a keep out move on its own. And these are generally his good panic moves. Obviously you want to use them in moderation, otherwise you'll get blown out from 1 or 2 really good reads from your opponent. Another underlooked move is shove. This move is pretty for what it does. If it's a counter hit, it really gets a lot of damage in where your opponent isn't expecting that damage to come in from. His panic tools are usually a lot of his tools that he likes using in the neutral anyways. It's just a matter of how you want to use them. Definitely use them appropriately and don't overuse them, or else you'll lose out on a lot of damage where damage could be made up with smaller poking tools like down forward 1, 2-1. I know I didn't mention this earlier, but down 3, this is more of a poking tool, more so than it is like a heavy committing tool. We'll go ahead and talk about some of his combos, which are very similar to Tekken 7's combos, and yeah. So to talk about some of his combos, King has a lot of unique routes, especially from a game like Tekken 7, where he did have a lot of dash jab combos. If you've never played Tekken 7, in this game you really do not have to worry about combo routes. Everything can be simplified pretty easily. So, for example, we'll go ahead and do his B&B. We'll start off with up forward 4, which is his normal standing launcher. Up forward 4 is pretty common of a launcher. The combo route that you'd want to do is something like up forward 4, down forward 4, 3, back 1, 2, and to while running 2 plus 4. This is a very simple combo. Not a whole lot going on here. You can also, I know I'm not doing a micro dash here, but to kind of keep it consistent, it would help to do a micro dash after the 4, because if your combo is slightly off axis, it will whiff from the side. So doing a micro dash in between kind of helps. Again, you want to do this after you do 4. And this is easily one of his easier B&Bs, does 64 damage. It's pretty good. He can do the same exact combo, same exact notation from full crouch down forward 2. Same exact thing, verbatim, 72 damage. Pretty good. Again, you want to just be aware of doing for full crouch down forward 2, if you are at a distance, before can whiff, which is why it's important to do some micro dashes occasionally in some of the combos, just to avoid that. You definitely have a lot of time to do a standing 4 here. In between, you do a micro dash. I don't know, I'm gonna get a lot of comments about like, oh, why didn't you do forward 1? Or why didn't you do a while standing 3? These can be used as filler as well for full crouch down forward 2 specifically, but they all do the same exact amount of damage. It's just style points and a little bit more wall carry. The one that I like using is full crouch down forward 2, forward 1 plus 2, down forward 3, back 1, 2, into Shining Wizard. This can get a little wonky if you're already off axis, so just be mindful of that. If you do want to do a more complicated and the ones that a little bit more damaging combo, you can do up forward 4, back 2, 4, back 3, into Shining Wizard. This does a little bit more damage, and what I like doing personally, this is a bit more of a nerd combo, but you could do up forward 4, you could basically do any variation that I mentioned, just add a 2 at the end of it into instant Shining Wizard. So we'll do the same exact combo that we did to start off with, up forward 4, down forward 3, back 1, 2. Doing a run up, standing 2, into Shining Wizard. This is definitely a way more damaging combo, but if you want to test yourself, you can do this basically with any ender from any combo variation. So for the full crouch series, if you want to do the same exact thing, you absolutely can. This definitely does reach if my execution does not suck. And it does an extra 5 points of damage. So if you want to test yourself with doing the complicated combos, by all means, the choice is there. You absolutely can't do that. As I mentioned before, King is really good at enforcing a mix-up game, especially after heat situations, but some of the things that he does struggle with is opponents who turtle or are really good at defense, or opponents who are really good at rushdown. The reason why these two tend to be the strongest against King are because these are more poke-catered characters. So a character like Xiao Yu, who really gets a lot of mileage from doing something as simple as she could do something as simple as sidestep 4 at a certain range, and I kind of just have to take that damage. If I block it, the most I can do is a while standing 4 here, or a crouch grab. But if this is blocked, I don't get a whole lot out of this, whereas she, on counter hit, can get a full-blown launcher, and she can control the range a little bit better than I can, because if I'm trying to do a longer range move, this might not work out in my favor, and I might get counter hit launched instead. Xiaoyu is also a bit more evasive, a bit more of a kit that's catered to doing pokes where even if I block it, the reward that I get is not nearly as good as the reward that they get on hit and if it launches. So, or on counter hit. Like, again, for Xiaoyu, as an example, her sidestep 4 on hit does pretty good damage, and she doesn't have to commit to anything, and she can still keep the distance between me and her. And on counter hit, it leads to a full-blown launcher. So the risk reward is in her favor, and poke heavy characters tend to be the more defensive style character archetypes. So characters like Zafina, Brian, Fang, these characters have a lot of non-committal moves, but if they choose to commit to them, I can get overwhelmed very easily. And if they don't commit to them, I'm stuck hesitating in these small poke options that I have to accept. King can't really chase down anything just because he has some pretty scuffed range. He does have forward 4, but these longer range moves tend to be a bit slower. And against turtles, it's just another term for basically saying really strong defensive characters. Against turtles, they tend to block a lot of mids, block a lot of, the mid mix-ups are pretty whack to them, or they duck a lot of throws, and all I'm left with are these little pokes that King does not get a whole lot out of, especially because all of his lows are 17 frames and higher. They do a decent amount of damage on hit, but they don't do a whole lot of damage by themselves. On counter hit, something like down back 3 does give guaranteed damage, but this is a 23 frame move, and it's pretty slow. Same thing with forward neutral 2. This is one of his best lows, but it is 17 frames. Sorry. It is 18 frames, and you do need that range in between, or else you can get counter hit out of it. So you want to really play into a really close-up range. If you think your opponent is trying to swing to keep you out of their range, forward 1 and forward neutral 2 work amazingly. But against turtles, you want to shift your game plan to be a little bit more up close, enforce this smaller mix-up game, play a little bit of a tighter game, and essentially force your opponent to deal with your options, like throws, because you can't do throws from back here. That being said, I think King is really strong for what it is. A lot of people are complaining about King, and to be honest, with some of the changes in the systems regarding counter hit throws, they absolutely should be right about this. And this is something that I didn't mention, that I am going to mention towards the end here. Counter hit throws in this game, and this is a bit of a nerd thing, but counter hit throws in this game are very strong. So strong to the point where, like, if you get counter hit thrown, there's a high chance you're not going to break it. This is coming from somebody who's played against hundreds of people, hundreds of times, and not once have I seen a counter hit throw be broken enough to where it seems like it's not strong. For me, playing against the people that I play against, which are also strong competitors, people like Shadow20Z, Speed Kicks, Joe Crush, these really strong players who can react to throws, even they struggle with the counter hit throw changes. So if you can find openings, and if you can find a way to reliably do this counter hit throw situation without crutching on this too much and using it as a defensive tool, absolutely use it 200%. Counter hit throws are absolutely such a strong thing in this game, where it really makes King as strong as he is. I think if they removed throws being counter hit, if they removed throws being homing, he might not be nearly as strong as where he is. He'll still be very strong, but I don't think he'll be nearly as strong compared to some other characters. Some honorable mentions regarding some moves. Wall standing 1+2 is a wall standing Punisher obviously from crouching from while standing. This is 18 frames, and it is -10 on block. It does launch on hit, but on block this is only jab punishable. Really good move. While standing 2, also a really good Punisher. This is 14 frame from crouching Punisher. This move is homing and does 36 damage. Ballerina spin, excuse me. Really good. And there was one other move that I wanted to bring up, and I cannot remember it for the life of me. I think that's all I have for now. But yeah, counter hit throw is really good. Honorable mention to those two moves specifically, just because I didn't get to them in my other moves. To kind of go hand in hand with King's strengths are obviously the best part of the video, the best for last, his throws. To kind of note some of his throws, he has Muscle Buster. This can be broken with a 1+2, and this move gives him a guaranteed back turn 3 if you time it correctly. If you can't time it correctly, that is a-okay. You could always do back turn down 4. That works just as fine. This move is really good. This is a 11 frame throw. Super strong. What I like doing with this, personally, I like to do crouch dash Muscle Buster, because his crouch dash chain throws, which I'll get to in a little bit, can only be broken with a 1 or a 2, making this third option basically unbreakable. Or rather, this wasn't even an option at all to your opponent. Aside from Muscle Buster, he has Giant Swing. Giant Swing is easily one of the most damaging throws in the game, especially at the wall here. The reason why it's the most damaging is because at a wall, this does 70 damage, guaranteed. So if I tech this throw, let's go ahead and mash, it does 50 damage instead of the full 60 or 65. Still a whole lot of damage, and again, at the wall, 70 damage is just outright guaranteed. Regardless if it's Blue Spark or not. To kind of talk about throws as well, some throws, as you can see, have a Blue Spark option to do it. It doesn't really need to be speed with Giant Swing. It just needs to be how long you're in crouching and how quick you can follow up with the button. This can be done as well with Tijuana Twister. On normal hit, this does 50 damage. There we go. Blue Spark does 55 damage. So it does 5 extra damage. And this is just across the table with all Blue Spark moves. He also has Tombstone, which does 60 damage, or 53 damage. Sorry, not 60. It's like me with a different throw. This doesn't give him anything guaranteed afterwards. It does leave me at -1. So nothing is really guaranteed. It's just really good positioning for King. He doesn't get any guaranteed follow-ups or anything like that, but a lot of damage. If you're on a floor break stage, this 100% floor breaks. Same thing with Muscle Buster. This also is a floor break. Tijuana Twister, unfortunately, does not floor break. And lastly, of course, he has Shining Wizard just for his normal throws. Shining Wizard is the most fun to do. I love doing Shining Wizard. Blue Spark is really nice to be able to get consistently. Normal does 40 damage, Blue Spark does 45, and you get really good positioning afterwards. Now that we talked about his normal throws, we're going to talk about his chain throws, which are easily some of the coolest and most damaging throws, aside from Giant Swing hitting the wall. So, we have, for starters, Rolling Death Cradle. There are 3 points where this throw can be broken. There is the initial grab, which can be broken with a 1 if we're doing this variation. There's the second point in the grab, which can be broken with a 1+2. And the last portion, which can be broken with a 2. Excuse me. Yeah, this last portion can be broken with A2. So breaking 2 here is the most common thing because that breaks the last one. But if he's doing rolling death cradle, the break to here is a 1. If we're doing the second part of RDC, the break is a 2. If we're doing the last part, which is the rolling death cradle portion, it's a... Sorry, did I say the middle was a 2? I meant 1 plus 2. It's a 1 plus 2 break. You can also hold the button down, as foreseen on social media. You can just hold the button down and it'll break the thing for you. No need to mash like I did. You can just hold the button and it'll break for you. The other variation of his chain throw, which is leg lock, and his other super damaging throw, King's Bridge. This does a whole lot of damage, and boy oh boy is it super satisfying to pull off. A lot of people are going to know that these are the correct breaks. With this one, this is a 1 plus 2 break, so if I have other king here, if I just have him do... If I have him do the whole thing here, right? We'll go ahead and break with 1 plus 2, and he'll kick out of it. If I don't kick out of this first portion, the rest is guaranteed. There is no break opportunity for this last part. But a lot of people know that this is the one that most people try to go for. So for us as the king player, what we want to do is mix it up. And we want to do other throws aside from just rolling Death Cradle because everybody knows the breaks for those. We do have Arm Breaker, triple Arm Breaker, 50 damage. You just mash 1 plus 2 afterwards. A good amount of damage. It's not a whole lot, but you get some good damage in. There we go. We can also do Head Jammer. And this is 60 damage. It's not 100 damage, but it does a pretty good amount of damage for what it does. This is very similar to the break in King's Bridge, where if you don't break this first portion, this second portion is completely guaranteed, which makes it very good to rack up some damage, which for King is kind of sometimes all you need. It's just doing the smaller damaging chain throws in exchange for being able to do more successful ones, whereas stopping and your opponent not breaking RDC, you're only guaranteed 40 damage. That being said, he also has the other options from Leg Lock, which is his Sleeper, which does 50 damage. He also has, in this game it's Scorpion Deathlock, but Sharpshooter is a 2-break. This is his more damaging one. This is the one that a lot of King players will tend to go to if they aren't going for King's Bridge, and it is a 2-break. Regarding the struggle combination, the portion, this part right here that goes into Head Jammer can be broken with a 2, and Arm Breaker can be broken with a 1. So from the Arm Breaker combination, he has a 3-way mix-up. He either has the 1, the 2, or the 1 plus 2. The 1 and the 2 deal less damage. The 1 plus 2 can lead to more damage, but doesn't necessarily have to be that because he also has Dragon Sleeper. So this is from his 1 plus 2 variation. If I'm holding 2 for RDC, he can do the 1 and he gets Dragon Sleeper, but I can break this with the 1 as well and risk basically risk eating RDC and risking 100 damage. Sometimes it's best to just do the 2. For us King players, that's what we want you to think, so good luck with that mental mix-up. Honestly, his throws are really good. Oh, I almost forgot. Up forward 1 plus 2. This is really good if you're at the wall because when you're up against the wall, you just get a free... You can basically throw your opponent wherever if you hold back. So you do up, forward, 1+2 hold, and then you can see I'm holding back here. If you hold back, you swap positions. If you don't hold back, he just picks them up and throws them. So depending on where you're at with the wall, let's just say, let me just throw him this way. If I go ahead and do this, and I throw him, I don't have to hold back here, I can just let it rock. Get him in a really simple combo, but super effective. Super strong move. He also has... I did use Irish Whip here. This isn't nearly as strong as what it was before, so I do not suggest using this. It's not really too worth it, in my opinion. He does have a few other throws. He does have head bash, but they did make the distance between King and his opponent pretty considerable, so nothing's really guaranteed here. It's just good damage. And he also has down back 2+3. This move can be chickened, which is just again a bit of a nerd thing for me. If I'm gonna go ahead and have King do down back 2+3, and we can mash 3+4 here. This just frame parry doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it does give some good damage return for King. I don't think you could hold 3+4 here and get the... Yeah, you have to just frame time this. Because if you just frame time this, you get some damage return, even though, you know, for King it's not... You still take the damage, but at least you get some damage return in, if that makes sense. There we go, we got it. And then it puts you both kind of in a far away position. Some little cool, neat tidbit about that. King really nets a lot of damage from his throws, so this is something that you want to do as a King player to really do a good job of being able to mix up what kind of throws you want to do. You can implement that with using your crouch dash. So this is definitely one of his strengths, and it's breaking down a defensive player's game plan by just doing something as simple as the crouch dash. The creativity goes miles with King players. Be creative. Be really creative. I hope this guide helps you in any way possible. Again, check out DashFight for other guides of theirs regarding other characters. You can also check out all the things shown in this video and the text version via the link in the description. And if you like this video, please leave a like or a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to see the feedback. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate y'all.